Hey, what's up, everybody? Scott Spreitzer, Arun Shiva, Indian Cowboy, as he's known over at DocSports.com. We are talking a whole lot of football for this week with NFL really getting down to the nitty-gritty, obviously college football playoffs kicking off this week, and we'll talk about all of that in just a moment. I want to say thanks to all of you who watched last week, who also commented. There were a ton of comments, and we appreciate that, man. Constructive criticism doesn't bother us either, and so it doesn't matter to me whether you chime in and say, man, you guys were awesome, or hey guys, you missed this or that. I don't mind, man. As long as you do it in a cool manner, that's what it's all about. And we'd like to have a conversation with you guys. So we'll be here each and every week. You'll be able to watch the videos late Wednesday nights or at the latest Thursday mornings and throughout the weekend. We'll jump into the games again in just a second. Real quick note, I wanted to mention that if you've yet to become a member over at DocSports.com, just want to give it a trial run, click on the link below the video, get yourself set up for a free $60 account. And then you can use those free $60 on any of our daily packages. Another quick note, all of our football plays for the weekend will be available Thursday afternoon on our homepages over at DocSports.com. Hey, it's getting real icy. We've got college football playoffs kicking off on Friday with one game, three more on Saturday. That Friday game, Indiana and South Bend to battle Notre Dame. Irish opened as high as 9. They're now 7.5. And that kind of depends on where you shop. I got about 20 books in front of me on my line service, and I would say the majority has 7.5. There are some 7s out there. Total sitting at 51. Percentage of bets kind of split down the middle at last check on Wednesday morning. A few more bucks have come in on Indiana overall. Going to be cold, 20 degrees at kickoff. But the good news is that the winds aren't supposed to be too bad. Saturday's games, just checking out the line service here. You got SMU, of course, and Penn State. In Happy Valley, the game at 12 noon Eastern. Right now, Penn State 8.5, 54. The line is pretty much where it opened. Total is up a smidge. We've seen this kind of dancing around between 8, 8.5. 4 p.m. Eastern, Clemson at Texas. Texas laying 11.5 or 12. That total 51.5. Couple of shops had this around 9 for the opener. I knew that wouldn't last when it came out, and it didn't. We kind of felt out here in Vegas that it would get into the double digits. And finally, Saturday, 8 p.m. Eastern, Tennessee at Ohio State. Buckeyes laying 7.5, 47. Tennessee getting both the tickets and the money. I'll say this, I see the only one of the 4 playoff games this weekend that's looking like a Joe's versus pros when I made a couple of phone calls to sportsbook directors early Wednesday was that Clemson-Texas game. You got like 60% of the tickets on Clemson, nearly 60% of the money on the Texas Longhorns in this one. Your thoughts?
Yeah, good setup there. For the Indiana Notre Dame, I'll tell you which one I'm really looking at a little bit more. But Indiana Notre Dame, I'm a big Cignetti fan, right? He used to coach for Nick Saban, and but at the same time, Notre Dame could be finally turning over that leaf and moving to the next echelon, right? After that first loss to Texas A&M, they certainly bounced back. The one that I'm most keeping an eye on, and I agree with you, I think Texas probably gets it done over Clemson, but who wants to go against Dabo at the end of the day? And that's the reason why Dabo destroyed my Crimson Tide's hopes, right? By beating SMU, he took Alabama out. And he did that because he never got a chance to interview for the Alabama job, even though he played there and coached there. So he was hurt by that. But the one game I'm very interested about is SMU and Penn State. People always say that James Franklin can't win the big one. I think that game has a decent chance of going under. SMU giving up 34 points against Clemson, which is almost a season high, except for that TCU game. I think they're going to bounce back defensively, and I think Penn State is just going to suffocate the heck out of them. I mean, Penn State giving up 45 points to Oregon is just wild, and I think they're going to bounce back defensively too. So I actually like the under in that game. I actually like Penn State. I mean, if SMU has issues against Clemson and the big boys of Clemson, they're going to have issues against Penn State. So my first lean in that game is probably the under, but I also like Penn State because I think James Franklin is tired of hearing they haven't gotten over the hump, and he loses the big game.
I tell you what, if you're just looking at the power ratings, Penn State has a clear-cut advantage over SMU, who wouldn't be in the top 12 if you just included teams power ratings-wise, and we talked about that on last week's show, so no reason to rehash. The one that jumped out at me right away, and again, I'm waiting to make sure that the winds aren't going to be bad. It's not supposed to be. It is supposed to be bone-chilling cold, but I like that over that Notre Dame game on Friday. I think that's got a good shot to land in the mid-50s, if not a little bit higher in that one. All right, let's turn to NFL action. We are down to the final 3 games for these teams, and we're going to kick things off on Saturday. 2 games on Saturday. Texans at Kansas City. That is the early game at 1 o'clock Eastern. KC laying now 3. About 12 hours ago, this line was 2.5. That total right around 41.5. I think the reason it probably went up is that there were reports on Tuesday night that Patrick Mahomes was on the practice field, I see, on Tuesday. It looks like he's going to do his best to give it a go with that ankle injury that he suffered last week. If he can't, you got Carson Wentz. I would think that, maybe check into some of the receiving props with Houston's Nico Collins. I saw, I should say, Wednesday morning, a longest reception prop of 26.5 yards. And I'd take a look at that. Casey's been giving up, a ton of big plays over the last 6 games. One of the worst at allowing big plays over that stretch. Your thoughts on Houston and KC?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are going to jump on the under in this game just because they think that neither team is going to score much, But I actually thought the over was decent too. I think you have nothing to lose, to be honest with you. And Houston comes into this game having won back-to-back games, and if I'm not mistaken, Houston is 9-5, but I don't think they've only won 3 in a row once this year. So I could easily see them having sort of a letdown here as well. Kansas City coming off a 21-27 win over Cleveland. They finally covered. They had missed 7 covers in a row. I don't have huge thoughts on this game, but what I will tell you is I wouldn't be surprised if this game goes over. I think Houston can be an active dog. At the same time, I think Kansas City might just let them throw. I don't think they have anything to lose, and I don't think they're going to try to. I mean, you're already got everything locked up, so why are you too worried? You know what I mean?
Sure.
So I don't know if Mahomes is going to play or not, but if he doesn't play, I really like the over in this game.
Listen, we don't know. We don't have any access to the doctor reports, the x-rays, all that stuff, the therapy that he's going through. But boy, I'm thinking if there's any chance of having this guy, turning a high ankle slight sprain into something worse, I would just sit him, start Carson Wentz. And guess what? If Carson Wentz wins, you start Carson Wentz again the next week if Mahomes is less than 90%. But anyway, I've had a high ankle sprain, and I'm no professional athlete, but man, they could take a while to get over with. I did it playing basketball. It took me about 4 months to get back to normal. My old decrepit rear end. But anyway, next up, we're going to talk about the Steelers at Baltimore, 6.5 and 45. Baltimore, the favorite there. The game at 4:30 Eastern on Saturday. The first meeting, 18-16 Pittsburgh. They didn't score a touchdown. That was the second time this season. They've kicked 6 field goals and won a football game. Baltimore fumbled twice in that game in their own territory, I see. And also we saw the humanization, I guess you could say, of Justin Tucker. And I don't mean that in a positive way. One of the all-time greats missed a couple of field goals against Pittsburgh. Your thoughts on the rematch?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because Pittsburgh comes off that loss to Philadelphia, and I almost wish they didn't. Now they're going to be extra little focused here. But, I don't think Pittsburgh's lost back-to-back games all year. I need to go back and check. I don't think they have. And it's been a while since Tomlin's lost back-to-back games, which says a lot about Tomlin. They do come off that 13-27. Of course, I leaned on the Eagles in the last time because I thought the Eagles played so bad against the Panthers. Then Baltimore coming off that big win against the Giants, and I never really trust Baltimore whenever they come off big wins, right? They came off the big win against Denver, 41-10, and then they laid an egg against Cincinnati. They beat Tampa Bay by 10, and they laid an egg against Cleveland their next game. What I would say is that the last time this game went well under, right? It was 40.5 and it went to 34 points. I think Pittsburgh has more success on the offensive end than 13 points than last time around. And I think Baltimore is obviously going to want to get some revenge from losing 16-18 last time. I think people, will want to take, maybe a few folks will think that the under makes sense, the round 2. But I think Eagles played, or I think the Steelers played really poor offense last game. And I think the Ravens will want to run up the score a little bit too. So I like the over. So I like the over.
And just in case if I lose you at all, folks who are watching, just go ahead and keep rattling off whatever you want to talk about. Having some issues again with the internet service. You pay through the nose, and this is what you get sometimes. But anyway, I look at this game, and I'm kind of leaning towards Pittsburgh right now. It's ultra tough to go against Mike Tomlin as an underdog. We all know that. This series has just been close for years, and I wouldn't be shocked if it's that kind of game again where it is close. Browns at Cincinnati, the Bengals laying 7.5 here, the total 47. This kicks off the Sunday games. I see the Bengals have kept postseason hopes alive, barely back-to-back road wins. Cleveland's a mess on offense. Jameis, 3 picks, 25 passes. He throws 3 interceptions last week. DTR comes in relief. He wasn't too hot either. Cleveland has decided to start DTR this week, and that might be waving the white flag, if you will. DTR's NFL career, 3.8 yards per pass, 1 touchdown, 7 picks. The Bengals won that first meeting, but gained just 223 yards. I do like the under here a little bit. You know what my one fear is? And, well, two fears. Obviously, you got a very good Cincinnati offense and a not-so-hot defense. They don't spend any money, this organization, on the defensive side of the football. But also the fact that if DTR is struggling, man, he can be setting up that Cincy offense on some short fields. Other than that, I think it's a lower scoring game than that total of 47.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a while since the Cincinnati game has been totaled somewhat this low. I mean, the Tennessee game was at 46, but we both thought that was going to go over. The Pittsburgh game was totaled at 46. That kind of made sense. Even the Charger game was totaled at 48. So it's interesting that this is maybe even DTR will have success against the Bengals. Who knows? But having said that, I know the public is on Cincinnati here, and I understand that coming out back-to-back wins. If you notice that Joe Burrow and his coach got a little tiffed, right, at the end of last game, I actually think the Bengals, I don't think they're going to the playoffs, but it would be nice to beat the Browns twice, right, to have a couple of feel-good things. And I think the coach obviously wants to keep his job too. So if you beat the Cleveland or the Ohio teams, if you will, a couple times, I think you're going to be okay as far as your job. And I think 6-8, I think this team really wants to show they can win 3 in a row, and he wants to show progress. It doesn't matter if it was against Dallas, who was hobbled, or Tennessee, who stinks, or Cleveland, who stinks. The vibe is they'll be like, well, we won 3 in a row. So I'm going to go with the Bengals here.
Yeah, I can't blame you for that. Lions at Chicago. Boy, I'm telling you right now, you've got the Lions are a 6.5 point favorite or so, that total right around 48. But I mean, you've got team dysfunction, which is, of course, Chicago, and you've got the MASH unit that's known as the Detroit Lions. I see. It's such a shame last week watching Detroit's injury list grow and the way it has the last several weeks. They've got 14 defensive players on the list this week. The good news for the Lions, the Bears' offense is awful. They've scored a grand total of 118 combined points, 14.8 points per game during their 8-game skid. No David Montgomery now for Detroit. Jahmyr Gibbs, though, he might go off against this Bears' horrible run defense. He ran for nearly 10 yards per pop in that first meeting. He only ran the ball, I think, 8 or 9 times, but he had clear-cut sailing. It's a tough one because, boy, Detroit, that injury list just keeps piling up. And this is one of those organizations, when you're just talking from a football fan perspective, you're rooting for, maybe even to finally make it to the promised land, to the Super Bowl, and then they just start tacking on injury after injury. Also, not always crazy about Dan Campbell's alpha male status as a head coach, doing some weird stuff like that onside kick last week. When now you have to tell the team, your opponent, you're going to kick onside. The surprise is gone. It was already low percentage. Now it's almost 0% of working. I don't know that I'm going to pull the trigger on this game, I see. Maybe you got something on this one.
Yeah, I mean, the Bears, man. In all honesty, the Bears should have covered against Minnesota. You know what I mean? And it is so pathetic that they don't cover, because that's what all the sharps are expecting them to cover and sneak inside the number. And, of course, Minnesota wins, and you just watch the game, you think every Joe Blow is going to cover here. You know what I mean? Every Joe Blow is going to take the most obvious side and cover here. What I will say is I think the Bears' defense will probably get a little bit better, right? They're going to be playing at home. This is a team that held the Packers to 20 points at home. They've been able to hold Carolina or Jacksonville at 10 or 16. I do think they'll play a little bit better defense here at home. They actually played pretty good defense. They were down 13-0 at the half, but they're actually playing pretty well. And I think Detroit is not going to try to do too much. I think they're just going to try to take the win and go home because they really do want to rest up. They have San Francisco on deck as well. So I do like the under. And plus, Detroit gave up 48 points in their last game and then 31 points to the Packers. That's a lot of points for a really good team, giving up 79 points in the last 2 games. And so I think they'll bounce back defensively. So I like the under.
All right, I can definitely make sense of that. I'm just bummed about Detroit, and I'm not a Detroit fan. I don't care one way or another. I'm a fan of the spread. I'm a fan of the NFL, but it would be nice to see a team have its best shot to go as far as they can. So hopefully they heal up a little bit. Cardinals laying 4, the total 47 at Carolina. I see the total's gone up a point or so, and I agree with that movement. Kyler Murray is really tearing it up when he's in a clean pocket, and Arizona shouldn't have too much trouble giving him a clean pocket against this defense. At the same time, after getting harassed by a very good pass rush, the Dallas Cowboys last week, you got a quarterback for Carolina in Young who ought to feel terrific going up against the lack of pressure that the Cardinals bring to the mix each and every week on the field. That defense just doesn't get pressure. So I do like this total to sail over 47 here.
Yeah, I like it as well. And you have Young who threw for 2 interceptions in his last game. So I think he'll play a lot better too. And combine that with Arizona losing their last 2 road games too, to both Seattle and to Minnesota. I think that's going to motivate them a lot. And they had some success against New England, which I'm happy for. But Carolina also, only put up 14 points in their last game. And I'm sure it's not far removed that's the lowest point total in over the last 7 weeks for them. And I think Carolina will be a good active dog. I think Arizona has a lot on the line, and therefore I like the over here.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that this game lands in the 50s by the time it's said and done. New England at Buffalo, big line here. Buffalo laying 14, total 46.5. I've never seen I see a quarterback do what Josh Allen is doing in my lifetime. The last 2 games, 700 plus yards, almost 10 yards per attempt, 5 touchdowns, no picks. And then with his legs, 150 yards in the last 2 games combined with 7 yards per pop, 5 rushing touchdowns. Are you kidding me? I mean, the guy just continues to amaze. He's built like a Russian. A guy's going 6'5", and he's about 240, and he moves so freaking well. I've never seen anything like this. I hearken back, as they say, to the Fran Tarkenton days when it came to quarterbacks who could run, and he was a small guy compared to a guy like this. It just haven't seen it like this. So it's fun to watch. Drake May, 43 for 53 the last couple of weeks for the Pats, but that Pats defense is so bad. Last in the league in weighted DVOA. I want to play against the Bills off of back-to-back 40-plus point outbursts, but it's awfully tough to back the Pats because of that bad stop unit, the bad DVOA numbers.
Yeah, when I looked at this game, it kind of reminded me of when the Bills faced the Titans. And it was like a 34-10 type of game, and the game went under. I think Buffalo is going to rest some people here. I think they're going to get a couple of quick scores. They're going to go up like 17-3, and they're going to kind of chill, And because at the end of the day, what you're trying to really play for is late in the season, right? Sure. You really do. And you're absolutely right about those Lions, because I feel so bad because they really need to get healthy and get healthy fast. And sometimes when you I hate to say this, but it's like a horse. When you push a team a little too hard, too early, or 2 in the middle, you pay the price at the end, So you kind of, but you also don't want them to be lackadaisical too. So, Buffalo, I agree with you. 42 points and 48 points. You beat the Lions. How do you get up for the lowly Pats? And I also think the Patriots don't want to get destroyed, meaning that I think they're going to really try to do ball control, just try not to get embarrassed and lose by a wide margin. And they've also given up 30 points to Arizona as well last game. I like the under. I think they kind of slow things down here. And I wouldn't be surprised if this game goes under the posted total.
I can't imagine. I mean, listen, the Pats are bad. I mentioned DVOA, weighted DVOA especially. I just can't imagine another 40-point outburst. I mean, there's letdowns. That's the way it is. I do a Wednesday night show with a former New York Giant football player, and we've talked about that stuff. When a team's almost perfect on offense 2 weeks in a row, it's tough to keep that going for a third straight week. You're playing at such a high level. Eagles laying a field goal at Washington. The total sitting 45.5. Philly trailed, 12-6 in the fourth quarter in that first meeting, but outscored Washington 20-6 over the final 12 minutes, got the win, got the cover. And statistically in that game, I see Philly dominated the Commanders, especially on the ground. Meanwhile, Washington's offense, middle of the pack in EPA per play since week 8. They've kind of calmed down a little bit. People see what they're doing offensively with Jaden Daniels. He's going to be missing a couple of his targets this week. Your take on this one?
Dude, I didn't think Philly was going to be this good early on, and they really come on strong late. And they're 12-2, and of course, what's to take away here is they dominated a good Pittsburgh team. And as far as their defense wise, they've given up 16-3, 17, 23, and that was against the Jaguars, a huge letdown. Then 6, 18, and 20 and 19, and 16 and 13. I mean, it's just, you're talking about a fantastic defense here. And then you have Washington here, who's given up 19 and 19 points in back-to-back games. They barely got past New Orleans, but we talked about how we thought that game was going to go under, and we also thought that New Orleans gave Washington some trouble too. And now this game sits the way that it is. I don't know what else to do but to take the Eagles here. I just think it's kind of obvious. And remember, again, Philadelphia needed 20 points in the fourth quarter, and maybe Washington steps up here. But Washington lost to Dallas, and they lost to Philadelphia by 12, as you know. They barely beat the Bears. Washington has been kind of sketchy lately too. In a way, I thought maybe take the over too, because at the end of the day, maybe Washington will be an active dog and Philadelphia will have a much better effort than a 20-point fourth quarter like they did last time. So I wouldn't be surprised at an over either, but I would lean on the Eagles and the over. Yeah,
I tell you, I'm with you, man, because 10 weeks ago, I thought, boy, if Nick Sirianni makes it through the next offseason, which would be this coming offseason, and is still the head coach of the Eagles, I would be shocked. If you saw the argument going on between Nick Sirianni and one of his defensive players last week, and then the defensive coach getting in between them, basically telling Sirianni to take a walk, I was shocked. And then, of course, you saw the player for the Eagles laughing at him. I'm not going to repeat it on a family show, but you could read his lips. And it wasn't, hey, man, I want to go give this guy a hug. I love him. It was a little worse than that when he was talking about his coach, and they were laughing at Nick Sirianni. I mean, they could challenge the Bears for team dysfunction, yet they keep winning game after game after game. The locker room's weird, but it's working for them. Giants at Atlanta. The Falcons laying 8.5. The total 42 in this one. I know Kirk Cousins is struggling. 1-4 his last 5, 63% completion rate, 1 touchdown, 9 picks, passer rating below 64. And so here comes Michael Penix. He gets his shot. He's thrown just 5 passes. Listen, you're kind of in and around the Falcons team as far as one of the teams that you like to watch closely. What's the word out there from the beat writers and all that kind of stuff? And again, it's one of the things that you like to follow are those Atlanta Falcons. Is Penix being built up? Does he look, according to the beat writers, like he is the real deal and it's time to give him a chance? I certainly think it is. I think Cousins, he kind of folded about a season before I thought he would. I really did. I thought Atlanta was doing a good job by having Penix learn under him. And I thought you'd probably get one more season out of Cousins, but it's not happening.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge Falcons fan. I mean, I grew up in Alabama, so that was the closest team when I was rooted for Atlanta. I can tell you that the fan base is very excited about Penix. They honestly wanted Penix a little earlier, but I also think the Falcons giving the $100 million, they wanted to validate that by saying, hey, look, we gave him every chance we could, And I think Raheem, at the end of the day, after that Raiders game, I mean, Kirk played really well early on, but the last 4 weeks has been a massive drop-off. He's been the worst quarterback in the NFL per QBR in the last month, and that's a shame because their skill positions are fantastic. Mijan and London and Drake, and there's so many good guys. And the team is excited. There's been multiple people in the Atlanta Falcons organization within the actual players that are like the best quarterback in the building isn't playing. And I think you're going to see that those boys come out here and put up some points. And I think and arguably Penix was the most pro QB ready quarterback. He had the most amount of experience coming in, having played. He's older, I think he's 26, playing in so many different pro sets and stuff. So I think the Falcons are going to do well this week, and I like them. And the only problem that I have is that it took 5 touchdowns from Lamar Jackson for them to beat. For Baltimore to beat the Giants 14-35. And they didn't play that bad against the Saints, losing 11-14. And they didn't play that bad against Dallas, losing 20-27 either. That's the kind of thing that worries me. And that's the thing, man. The books are so sharp. They know all this, and they put a 10 spot on Atlanta. But having said that, I still lean on the Falcons, and I lean on the over as well. Because I don't trust that Atlanta defense at all. I mean, if Desmond Ridder, the former DoorDasher, right, scores 9 points on you, and after you gave a 44-42 to Minnesota and 38 to Denver, I like Atlanta and the over here.
My gosh, was that setting football back about 50 years with that Raiders-Falcons game? It was just ugly to watch. I don't go to Raiders games, and I've been in Vegas my entire adult life, but, they charge a ridiculous amount of money, had a couple of comp opportunities to go, and I can't do it. And I was certainly glad I didn't go down to Allegiant Stadium by the Strip right outside the Mandalay Bay on Monday night. That was definitely ugly. And Desmond Ridder, oh my gosh, I'll just move on from that. Titans at Indianapolis, Colts laying 3.5, total 42.5. The Will Levis experiment is done in Tennessee. They're switching to Mason Rudolph. That'll be temporary. Of course, they'll look in the offseason to get a quarterback through the draft or through some free agency, some trades, things of that nature. But Rudolph gets the starting nod for the Titans in this particular game. It's certainly an upgrade. And as far as the Colts go, I was reading some stuff on Action Network, and they showed us that out of 42 qualified NFL quarterbacks this season, Anthony Richardson is 42nd in EPA plus CPOE. EPA is obviously expected points, estimated expected points for the team that has possession before the play. And then if you combine that with CPOE, which basically that's a metric that says how well a quarterback completes throws compared to the difficulty of the throws, and then subtracting the completion probability from 1. It's 42nd out of 42 quarterbacks, 14 starts in the NFLIC for AR. And in those 14 starts, 50% passer, 6 yards per attempt, more interceptions than touchdowns. I like this football team, the Colts. If AR, I mean, boy, you watch him and he's an incredible NFL athlete. He hasn't figured out the quarterback position. But this team's got enough around him to where if they can get decent quarterbacking, they could win these games.
What's wild about that game against the Colts and the Broncos, I mean, it looks easy now, 31-13. Oh, take Denver off of a loss. But Denver is down that game 13-10 going into the fourth quarter before they put up 21 points in the fourth quarter. And, Richardson threw for 2 interceptions. Funny thing is Bo Nix also threw for 3 touchdowns, but 3 interceptions too. To be honest with you, I like Tennessee here. Until the Colts can show us something, they've lost 3 straight covers, and maybe they bounce back here, but the line is only 3.5 too, so that says something. I think Mason Rudolph will step up. I think Mason Rudolph understands, like, look at Baker Mayfield, right? The guy who got a second shot, who's reinvented himself, and look at Darnold in Minnesota. So for him, this is his chance. I mean, this is his real audition here. And, at the end of the day, Tennessee only lost by 4 to Jacksonville and 10 to Cincinnati, and they beat Houston recently too. I think Tennessee will have some success here. I like the plus the 3.5 here. And if you want to, you can take a look at the over as well, because, only 13 points for Indianapolis last game too. But I like Tennessee first, and then I like the over.
And really quickly, to be fair to Indianapolis, I mean, you got a running back, a very good running back, who was trying to go into the end zone to open up the lead over Denver, and he lets go of the football as he's crossing the goal line. It turns into a touchback. So if he scores there, Taylor, then it's a situation where this team's up by a couple of scores that might be on their way to victory last week. But it's the way it goes, man. Rams laying 3.5, the total 46.5 at the New York Jets in this one. And listen, the threes are gone. Your take on this one, I see. I'm gonna just let you have at it with this one. Listen, I know Sean McVay's been money in December games. Kind of lean towards the over a little bit with the way Aaron Rodgers has been playing of late, last couple of weeks, and especially his favorite receiver, who's also been playing extremely well the last couple of weeks. Your thoughts?
I mean, Aaron Rodgers, dude, I think he makes more news off the field than it is on the field. And, he had him and Ryan Clark got in there, tiffed back and forth recently too. And, the Rams at the end of the day, they're 8-6, but I mean, dude, they beat a Saints team that is up and coming, meaning of late when they got their new coach and stuff. So when you beat a team, depending on when you beat a team, it says a lot about your team, right? Sure. Then this team beats the Bills. I mean, they beat the Bills by 2, and it's just a casual, nonchalant. They beat the Bills, and then they beat the and then they beat the Niners 12-6 when the Niners really needed that game, And outside of the Philadelphia loss and maybe the loss to Miami, this team still beat Seattle. They beat Minnesota by 10. And I'm tired of us maybe trying to be overly sharp sometimes. At the end of the day, the Jets just suck with Aaron Rodgers.
No doubt.
It could be just that simple. We don't need a doctorate, you know what I mean, or a master's or anything.
Yeah, I see. We can forget about talking about CPOE and EPA per play. They just suck. It's the SUCK of it all.
And yes, they beat Jacksonville, and they were pretty close against Miami. I'll tell you that. They were pretty close against Seattle, and they lost Indianapolis by 1. So I understand. They beat Houston. I get it. I understand why the line is the way that it is. And it's such a trap because I think this is the biggest public play on the board with 76%. The safer play, I think, is the over, because the Rams only put up 12 points in their last game after putting up 44 on Buffalo. And the Jets could be an active dog. So I would say the over first, and then I would say just continue to bet against the Jets. They always seem to make the bad plays at the end.
Watch that weather, make sure it's not windy, and I'm with you on that over 46.5. The Vikings laying a field goal at Seattle, total 42.5. Both teams tied atop their respective divisions. At 12-2, Minnesota has clinched at least a wild card spot. And I wanted to really quickly get your thoughts on Sam Darnold. I don't want to take too much away from what he's done this season. He's finally had some good coaches around him, good quarterbacks coach, good offensive play calling. He hasn't had that throughout his career until a stop in Minnesota. But sometimes, and maybe I'm being too picky here, sometimes it seems like his passes get away from him. Like he'll have a receiver breaking over the middle of the field, and instead of leading him, he throws it behind him. And again, I might be, being too picky with Sam Darnold here. It'll also be interesting to see if the Vikings keep him around after this season. They got the young guy from Michigan that they brought in that got hurt, and they picked up another guy along the way. Sam Darnold, I was driving around the other day in Las Vegas getting some things done. I'm listening to Colin Cowherd, who's an extremely talented voice on the air, no doubt about it, whether you like him or not, folks. He's extremely talented. And I'm listening to him talk about, Indianapolis wouldn't be a bad spot for Sam Darnold. I kind of get that in the offseason. But for now, you're at Seattle, Geno Smith. I tell you, he looked rough in relief. I should say Sam Howell looked rough in relief of Geno Smith last week when Geno got banged up a little bit, got removed from the game. He could be under constant pressure in this one. And I'll tell you what, he was pressured on more than 43% of his dropbacks last week. And I think when that happens, he tends to panic a little bit. And because of that, I do believe you can see under this posted total right now with the Vikings in Seattle. I don't know that Geno's going to be able to overcome his issues when he's got a fierce pass rush coming at him.
Yeah, I think that's why this total is so low. I do like Seattle to win this one, possibly outright. And, to cover definitely, but definitely possibly outright. I understand that Minnesota has won 7 in a row, but I think it's all against subpar teams. Indianapolis, Jacksonville, Tennessee, Chicago, Arizona, Atlanta, Chicago again. When they faced the Rams, they lost by 10, right? They did play the Lions close to their credit. And I think Seattle, this is a bad loss to Green Bay, but we knew how motivated Green Bay was going into that game. So that's not really a bad loss. And they beat Arizona twice, which is tough to do. And then they beat the Jets by 5, and then they beat the Rams too. So they were on a 4-game winning streak coming in. And I like Seattle here. I think they come off a bad loss on national television, and I think they bounce back here. And I don't trust Minnesota here. I would trust Minnesota even more if they were favored by 4.5 on the road, but they're not. I think Seattle wins outright.
All right, 49ers at Miami. Miami laying 144.5 on the total. And I'm going to take just a second to I love to shoot down this myth. But I do it every chance I get on almost every show I'm on. And it happens to be with the West Coast teams on the Eastern Seaboard. And my little circle of bettors is 7 or 8 guys out here in the Southwest and on the West Coast. One of those guys has a database that goes back over 40 years, and he's meticulous at entering all the correct info. And what we did several years ago, and it stayed this way, is to look up how West Coast teams do on the Eastern Seaboard, whether it be an early Sunday game, a late Sunday game, Monday, Thursday, because we always hear, oh boy, the West Coast team, it's their body clock. They're not going to be ready to go. Guess what, folks? Over the last 40 years, the West Coast team is 54% against the spread playing on the Eastern Seaboard. Doesn't matter what time. And if it's the second straight week, which it isn't here, if it's the second straight week, they are better than a 65% cover on the Eastern Seaboard. In other words, it's baked into the number by the books. Do you really think they're not going to know this stuff? So I love to dispel that myth I see when it comes to West Coast on the East Coast. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's always nice when you have those thoughts. You're very knowledgeable when it comes to those elements. You cut out a little bit on me that we're talking about. Yeah, the 49ers Miami game. Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think it's interesting. Miami's favored by 1.5, right? Both these teams are 6-8, and you would think that the Dolphins are having such a bad season and Niners were going to be okay, and now they both have the same record, which is kind of funny. And San Francisco comes off that 6-12 loss, and they lost to Buffalo and Green Bay and Seattle. They just had a really tough stretch. And Miami really, I thought, was going to do better against Houston, but they didn't. They fell short against Green Bay as well. And, I got to go with San Francisco. This, to me, comes down to the coaching staff. And I just trust the coaching staff of San Francisco to get them back on track a lot more than Miami, who seemed to fall short late. So I'm going to go with the Niners here.
At the Dolphins last week, that was a big letdown, obviously. Defense actually played well last week and couldn't get the job done. So next up, Jaguars here in Sin City. Las Vegas laying a point in this one, the total 39.5. The Raiders moved to Sin City in January of 2020. I'm telling you what, Mark Davis has done nothing right since. Pierce has to be shown the door, the head coach. Everyone in this town couldn't believe he was promoted a head coach in the first place when he was. They don't have a true NFL QB1. And listen, I'm a Travis Hunter fan, the kid that just won the Heisman for Colorado. This team needs a quarterback. And if they get that top draft pick, go get Shadur. Get Shadur Sanders, put him in place, let him operate. He played an entire first season at Colorado behind a horrible offensive line. Dion and the gang, as far as his coaches, have done a much better job working on this offensive line. After the Nebraska game, they got their stuff together. Still not great, but Shadur makes them look even better than they are. I'm hoping the Raiders go out and get Shadur, but right now they have nothing. At the same time, you got Mac Jones, who I think is the lesser of two evils in this game. Am I going to say go out and bet on the Jaguars or the Las Vegas Raiders? No, but if I had to, for the sake of the show, I see Mac Jones and the Jags.
Yeah, I agree with you. And what's interesting is I think eventually what will happen is Who is Dion more likely to follow, Shador or Travis Hunter, right?
Yeah.
So if you're going to hire Anthony Pierce, wouldn't you hire Deion Sanders at some point? Of course you would, and in Las Vegas as well. So I think you get Shador, and then you get Deion to come follow. They're in the same area, right? Vegas and Colorado are close by. And I think guys will come play for Deion, especially he'll have a recruiting portal from college up. So I think Deion's talent is going to be between that 3rd to 7th rounders, right? Those guys will want to play for Deion, and those guys will kind of want to get into that Vegas world. So I wouldn't be surprised at all. And I think that I think the NFL is rooting for Jacksonville to win this game, because if they do, that's a bigger chance for them to land, a Shador and so on. So, Jacksonville played the Jets tough. They beat Tennessee. They played Houston tough. They lost to Minnesota by just 5 points. They lost to Philadelphia by just 5 points. They lost to Green Bay by just 3 points. They beat New England. They have a lot better, output recently than obviously the Raiders do, who failed to cover 5 of their last 6. So I agree with you. I like Jacksonville as well.
Might be the first time all season in a home game for the Raiders they actually have more fans than the visitor. I can't imagine a big following coming out from Jacksonville, or a whole bunch of people out here in Las Vegas residing here from Jacksonville. Tampa Bay laying 4, total 48.5 against the Dallas Cowboys in the Big D. And Baker Mayfield, man, he tore up a very good Chargers defense last week. The Bucs outgained LA 506 to 206, 7.7 yards per play to 4.6 for the Chargers. And how about Baker, man? 3rd best completion rate or percentage this season, nearly 71%. He's 3rd in the league in passing touchdowns and 6th in passer rating. I see, Dallas can put decent pressure on QBs. We saw it again last week. They've won 3 of 4. Cooper Rush has been playing well. 8 touchdowns, only 1 pick in those 4 games. I think we got an over here. I don't think, I think Dallas can get a pass rush. I don't think they can defend Mike Evans throughout the course of this game.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a high-scoring affair, number one. And number two, if you remember, Dallas beat this team 31-14 last year. So Baker remembers that. And, of course, Baker is sort of going back home, right? That whole Oklahoma, Texas area. And he'll want to do well in this game. They've won 4 in a row. And as a Falcons fan, I kind of want Tampa Bay to lose. But at the same time, why is that line -3.5, right? So I think, or even 4 at this point. So, yeah, maybe Dallas gets up and maybe Tampa Bay has a letdown. But I think at the end of the day, I think you have to either side with Tampa Bay or you have to side with the over. And I think that's the only way to go. And I think the Dallas will score. It's fair. Dallas should have had more than 20 points against Cincinnati, to be honest with you. So they put up 34, 27, 20 recently and 30 against Carolina. So Dallas is actually scoring some points. So I like either Tampa Bay or the over here.
Yeah, the only caveat that I have with Tampa Bay when they're laying points is it seems like every time I'm ready to pounce on Tampa Bay and praise them and Baker, who's done a great job in resurrecting his career after leaving Cleveland, that's where they have a letdown. It scares me, but I get it here, and I do think there'll be a lot of points in this game. Finally, Monday Night Football. Oh boy, we're all ready for this one after the Raiders and Falcons. Yeah, let's watch the Saints at Green Bay. Packers laying 14.5 here, total 42.5. Derek Carr is out. Alvin Kamara is questionable. The Saints have a lot of banged up bodies. There's no doubt about that going into this game in Green Bay. I'm going to throw something at you real quick here, because a few weeks ago I had the Giants covered the spread against New Orleans. I was very thankful for that blocked field goal, so I didn't have to sweat overtime. But we got the win. We got the cover going against them. And I'd mentioned in my write-up at Doc Sports that, Taysom Hill doesn't get enough credit for being a key to this offense this year. And what I mean by that is he had been targeted 28 times in the previous 4 games before getting hurt. And over a 3-game stretch in those final 3 was 2-1 before that injury, or they were. And in fact, New Orleans was 4-3 this year straight up when Hill was on the field. And again, he was getting a lot of targets. They're 1-6 and average 17 points per game when Taysom Hill's not on the field. I mean, it's as simple as that. Again, all these injuries, but gosh, who wants to lay 14.5 in the NFL? Are you going to look at either side of this, or are you going to go with the total? I'm kind of looking at the total here.
Yeah, I definitely think that. So I thought about taking even Green Bay. I'm sorry, talking about even taking New Orleans, right? Coming off that, I feel like New Orleans is covering quite a bit here. They covered against Washington, losing 19-20. Covered against the Giants. I'm sorry, not covered. They beat the Giants 14-11. Only lost to the Rams by 7 and beat Cleveland and Atlanta. And so 2 things here. One, New Orleans, I think, is playing fantastic defense. I think Green Bay is playing high-quality defense too, holding Seattle to 13 points. So this is kind of an indirect lean on New Orleans. I either lean on the under in this game, right? Because I think that New Orleans will the only way they cover and play well is through their defense. It's certainly not through their offense. And I also think that they could cover this game as well. I think this is their Super Bowl. I think they'll have all the attention on them. I think their head coach now, who's the new head coach, if you will, because of the changeover, I think he wants to make an impression. With 74% on the over, I like either New Orleans or the under, and I think I like the under a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on this total. I think it's going to stay under the total. Any final words for everybody watching the video this week before we wrap it up?
No, I hope everybody has a wonderful Christmas holiday, and Happy New Year to everybody. And I wish them the best. And I hope your bowl season is fantastic. And be sure to jump on the premium selections for myself and Scott, as well, as we'd like to try to get you a good ROI.
And don't forget about that $60 free account located below the video. You can click on that and get signed up if you're not yet a member at DocSports.com. All of our plays available Thursday afternoon, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific for the upcoming week. And that includes, we've got several bowl games to pick from. I'll have a couple, and I'm sure IC will also. When we come back next week, we're going to be talking, of course, Week 17 of the NFL, and we'll have some college football playoffs behind us so we can really start digging into those. For Indian Cowboy, I'm Scott Spreitzer. Have an outstanding Christmas holiday and a great and safe week and a profitable one. You know what to do, everybody. Let's put them in the win column. We'll talk to you next week.